The night I lost my home to the storm, I thought nothing could ever break me again. But I was wrong. Because when I knocked on my daughter's door, carrying the last pieces of my life in 3 garbage bags, she looked at me and said, "Mom, we need privacy. My boyfriend isn't comfortable with you here." That rejection cut deeper than the storm that had torn my house apart. If you believe no parent deserves to be abandoned when they need their children most, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful true stories. My name is Margaret Hayes. I am 67 years old, and I thought I had already lived through every kind of loss life could hand me. I buried my husband, Henry, 8 years ago after a sudden heart attack. I learned to live alone in our little house on the edge of Willow Creek, Missouri. I built my days around small routines, brewing tea at 3, tending my rose garden, baking pies for the neighbors. Quiet, steady, ordinary days. Until the sky turned green. It was a Tuesday late afternoon. I had just finished folding laundry when the sirens screamed across town. In Missouri, storms are part of life, but this one had a hunger in the air, a heavy silence before the roar. The television flickered with warnings. Large tornado on the ground, moving northeast. Direct path. Willow Creek subdivision. My neighborhood. I had minutes, maybe less. My hands shook as I pulled down an old suitcase. What do you save when you can save almost nothing? Not clothes. Not dishes. Memories. I packed my wedding photo with Henry, my daughter Lily's baby pictures, my mother's pearl necklace, important papers, Henry's pocket watch. That was all. 43 years of living reduced to one suitcase. I rushed into the basement, heart pounding, clutching Henry's old sweater like a lifeline. And then it came, the sound. Not thunder. Not wind. A monstrous freight train tearing through wood and steel and glass. The world roared, the house shuddered, beams snapped like twigs, and then silence. When I climbed the stairs, I no longer had a home. Where my living room once stood, there was only sky. My roses shredded into nothing. My kitchen table wedged into a broken wall. I stood among the ruins, and for the first time since Henry's funeral, I cried until I couldn't breathe. The next morning, a young insurance adjuster, barely old enough to shave, walked through the wreckage with a clipboard. He never looked at me, just at the numbers. His verdict: total loss. With depreciation and deductible, maybe $90,000. $90,000 for the place where I raised Lily, where Henry built his workshop, where I hosted every Christmas dinner. $90,000 for my entire world. By noon, my kind neighbor Mrs. Patterson drove me to town. We stuffed my few salvaged belongings into her trunk. 3 garbage bags, 1 battered suitcase, Henry's old toolbox. That was all I had left. But I wasn't afraid yet. I still had Lily. Lily, my only child. Lily, who I had raised alone after Henry died, who I had supported through college, who I had believed would never let me feel abandoned. I drove to her home in Oakwood, a wealthy suburb full of manicured lawns and white fences. The kind of place where bad things never seem to happen. Her boyfriend Mark had bought the house, and it looked like something out of a glossy magazine. Perfect, polished, a place where tragedy didn't belong. I rang the bell. When Lily opened the door, for a moment I thought I was safe. Her blonde hair was tied back, her eyes wide. Mark appeared behind her, handsome in that polished, calculated way men like him often are. His gaze flicked immediately to my bags on the porch. "It's just temporary," I said quickly, stepping inside. "Just until the insurance clears and I find an apartment. I won't be a burden." They exchanged a look. That look told me everything. Lily's voice was soft but firm. "Mom, we need privacy. This house is our sanctuary. You'd be more comfortable somewhere else. Maybe an extended stay hotel." Mark added smoothly. "We can help you with a little money. A few hundred to get you started." The words landed like knives. Privacy. Sanctuary. As if my presence would poison their perfect lives. I left with my 3 bags, my suitcase, and Henry's toolbox, and drove to a Walmart parking lot on the edge of town. That night, I leaned my seat back and clutched Henry's toolbox to my chest like a shield. I was 67 years old, homeless, unwanted by my only child. The first night, fear kept me awake. Every car that pulled in, every sweep of headlights across my windshield, made me shrink down, afraid someone would see me for what I was, an old woman living out of a car. The second night, hunger gnawed at me. I bought a gas station sandwich, the cheapest one I could find, and ate it cold. I brushed my teeth in a McDonald's restroom, avoiding the pity in strangers' eyes. By the third night, shame had taken root. My money was almost gone. I searched my purse for stray coins, and instead found something else. Faded business card. The edges soft from years of being carried. The name, Richard Callahan. My first love. My high school sweetheart. The one I had never truly forgotten. On the back, in my 17-year-old handwriting, I had once written, "Don't forget me." For years, I had carried it without ever daring to call. But that night, under the harsh lights of a Walmart lot, I dialed. The phone rang. And then his voice. Older, deeper, but unmistakably Richard. "Callahan Enterprises. This is Richard." My throat closed. "Richard, it's Margaret. Margaret Hayes." Silence. Long enough that I thought he didn't remember. Then, softly, he said my name like a memory come back to life. "Margaret." The words tumbled out. "My house was destroyed. Lily doesn't want me with her. I'm in a parking lot. I don't know where else to go." His reply came instantly, steady and firm. "Tell me where you are. I'm coming now." 2 hours later, a silver car pulled up beside mine. And then he was there. Older, grayer, lines etched on his face, but the same storm-gray eyes I remembered. He walked straight to me, smiled gently, and said 3 words that made me forget the cold, the shame, the rejection. "You look beautiful." For the first time in days, I believed I was safe. Richard loaded my bags into his car as if they were precious treasures. He opened the passenger door, no hesitation, no pity, just certainty. We drove through winding roads until iron gates opened before us. Behind them stood his house. Stone walls, wide porches, tall oaks. Strong. Lasting. Everything my old house no longer was. He led me to a guest room bigger than my entire living room had been. Clean sheets, a view of gardens, a soaking tub in the bathroom. "Make yourself at home," he said. "This place has been too quiet for too long." For the first week, I felt like a guest who didn't belong. I tiptoed, apologized too often, folded my hands at the table. But Richard was patient. He brewed coffee in the mornings and placed a cup by my seat. In the afternoons, he walked me through his greenhouse, showing me the orchids he had spent years cultivating. At night we cooked together. When I made my old pot roast recipe, he closed his eyes after the first bite and said, "Margaret, this is the best meal I've had in years." Something inside me healed that night. But Lily had not forgotten me, though not for the reasons a daughter should. When she learned where I was staying, her tone changed. Suddenly, gifts appeared at Richard's door. Silk scarf, expensive candles, gourmet chocolates, each accompanied by a neat little card. "So happy you found love again, Mom. Let's start fresh." But I knew better. It wasn't love. It was calculation. She had heard the name Richard Callahan, and she knew exactly what it meant. Richard saw it too. One evening, after a quiet dinner, he took my hand. "Margaret," he said softly, "I think it's time we talk to Lily and Mark." Clearly. I knew his tone, calm, but with an edge of steel. The same man who once fought for me in high school, now prepared to defend me again. And in that moment I realized, maybe I wasn't the helpless mother who had been cast aside. Maybe, for the first time in years, I could stand tall again. Richard didn't waste time. Within a week of me moving in, he invited Lily and Mark for dinner. The day of, I stood in front of the mirror for longer than usual. Richard had insisted on buying me a new dress, a soft blue one that matched my eyes. "Margaret," he'd said, "you deserve to feel like yourself again, not like a shadow." When Lily and Mark arrived, they stepped out of their shiny SUV with carefully practiced smiles. Mark carried a bottle of wine so expensive he probably Googled, "Impress a millionaire." Lily hugged me with arms that felt like stiff cardboard. Inside, Richard was gracious but firm, the perfect host with a quiet authority that made Mark fidget in his seat. Over roasted chicken and rosemary potatoes, Lily finally leaned forward, her voice dripping with sweetness. "Mom, we were so worried about you. We didn't know how to help. Mark, and I think it's wonderful that you found companionship again." Companionship. The word made me wince. Richard set his fork down slowly, wiped his hands, and looked directly at her. His eyes were calm, but there was no mistaking the steel underneath. "Lily," he said, "your mother doesn't need companionship. She needs respect. And from what I understand, she didn't get that from you when she needed it most." Lily flushed, glancing at Mark, who looked as if he'd rather disappear into his wine glass. Richard continued, "Let's be clear. Margaret has a place here. Not as a guest. Not as a burden. This is her home as much as mine. Anyone who treats her otherwise will find the door closed. Permanently." The silence that followed was heavy. Lily's mouth opened, closed, then opened again. I didn't mean." But Richard cut her off with a raised hand. "Intentions matter less than actions. You turned your mother away when she had nothing but 3 bags and a car seat to sleep in. That is not a mistake. That is a choice." For once, Lily had no words. Something inside me shifted that night. For years, I had carried the quiet shame of always being the one to forgive, the one to make excuses. But hearing Richard say what I had never dared to speak aloud, it felt like armor slipping over my shoulders. After dinner, when they left, Richard turned to me with a smile. "You don't have to fight alone anymore." Weeks passed, and my life began to bloom again. Richard encouraged me to start painting, something I hadn't touched since college. He set up a studio in one of his sunlit rooms, complete with canvases and oils. I painted the storm first, a swirl of gray and green, jagged lines tearing across the sky. Then I painted roses like the ones I lost. Piece by piece, I painted myself back together. But Lily, she wasn't done. I began to notice little things. A sudden phone call from her, asking casually about Richard's company. A visit where she lingered too long in his study, pretending to admire the bookshelves while her eyes darted to the framed financial articles. Mark dropping comments like, "Real estate's tough right now. Maybe Richard could give me some pointers." It was obvious. They hadn't come to rebuild with me. They'd come sniffing for opportunity. One evening, Richard and I sat on the porch, the cicadas buzzing in the warm night. He leaned back, hands folded behind his head. "They think they're subtle," he said. "But Margaret, I've built my life reading people exactly like Mark. Ambitious, hungry, careless with loyalty. Your daughter is blinded by his charm, but I see right through him." He sighed. "It hurts, Richard, to realize my own child sees me as a stepping stone instead of a mother." He reached for my hand. "Then maybe it's time she learns you are not a stone to step on. You are steel. Stronger than she imagines." The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Richard's company was hosting a charity gala, a glittering event at the Willow Creek Country Club. Politicians, business leaders, artists, all of them would be there. He insisted I attend at his side. When Lily heard, she called in a rush. "Mom, that's wonderful. Mark and I would love to support you. Do you think Richard could extend us an invitation?" Richard glanced at me when I told him. A small smile curved his lips. "Of course. Let's invite them. Let's see how they carry themselves." The night of the gala, I wore a deep green gown Richard had chosen. As we entered the hall, his hand steady at my back, I saw Lily and Mark already mingling, their laughter a shade too loud, their smiles a shade too eager. Introductions began. Richard introduced me proudly. "This is Margaret Hayes, my partner. She is the heart that steadies me." Partner. Not guest. Not companion. Partner. The word rippled through me like sunlight. When Lily and Mark joined our circle, I watched as Mark tried to dominate conversations with men who had built fortunes twice his size. His arrogance was almost painful. At one point, he slipped into a story about guiding younger entrepreneurs. A story I knew wasn't his. Richard's eyes gleamed, but he let him ramble. His patience that of a lion waiting to pounce. Later that evening, Richard excused himself to speak with a senator. I found myself face to face with Lily. Her mask slipped for just a second, her eyes sharp, calculating. "Mom," she whispered, her voice urgent. "You need to think carefully. You've been alone for years. Don't you think Richard deserves someone younger? Someone who can give him more?" Froze. She continued. "I don't mean any harm, but, men like him with money, with influence. They need women who can match that energy. You could set me up with him. He'd still take care of you, of course." Her words struck like ice. My own daughter, my flesh and blood, suggesting I hand over the man who had saved me from ruin. Something inside me hardened. For the first time, I didn't feel crushed by her betrayal. Felt fire. I smiled calmly. "Lily," I said, "Richard already has a woman who matches his energy. And it isn't you." She blinked, stunned, as I walked away. When we returned home that night, Richard listened as I told him everything. His expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. "Then we show them," he said simply. "We show them what happens when they underestimate you." The next weekend, Richard invited Lily and Mark for lunch. But this time it wasn't just a casual meal. He gathered them in his study, shelves lined with leather-bound books, the fireplace casting shadows across the room. "Mark," Richard began, "I hear you're interested in business. I've been thinking about mentoring you." Mark's eyes lit up, greed barely concealed. "That would be incredible, sir. I'd love to learn." Richard leaned forward. "Good. Then here's your first lesson. Integrity is non-negotiable. I built my company by trusting the right people. And I can tell within minutes who is trustworthy and who isn't." Mark's smile faltered. Richard's gaze shifted to Lily. "And loyalty matters. Margaret stood by me when she had nothing. When others turned her away, she chose dignity over desperation. That is the kind of loyalty that cannot be bought." Lily shifted uncomfortably, her cheeks flushing. Then Richard delivered the final blow. "So here's the truth. There will be no mentoring. No handouts. No shortcuts. If you want success, you'll build it yourselves. And if you try to take advantage of Margaret, you'll find every door in this city closed to you. Starting with mine." The silence in that room was deafening. Mark looked furious but powerless. Lily looked as if she'd been slapped. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. Felt tall. Felt unbreakable. Months passed. Lily's calls grew less frequent. Mark's name stopped appearing in business circles. Richard's quiet influence ensured that. Word travels fast when Callahan disapproves. As for me, I stopped waiting for Lily to be the daughter I wanted. Instead, I started being the woman I had always been too afraid to be. Strong. Unapologetic. Live. Richard and I traveled. First to the coast, then to Paris, where he insisted I paint the Seine at sunset. My canvases filled with color again. My laughter returned. And one spring evening in the garden behind his house, Richard knelt with Henry's old pocket watch in his hand, the same one I had saved from the storm. "Margaret Hayes," he said, "you've been my heart since I was 17. Let's not waste any more years apart. Marry me." Said yes, not just to him but to life, to second chances, to love after loss. At our small wedding beneath blooming oaks, I saw Lily at the edge of the crowd. She looked older, diminished. But when our eyes met, I didn't see anger in her anymore. I saw regret. And I realized that was the real revenge. Not words, not punishments, but living fully, joyfully, without her permission. Because the storm may have taken my house. Lily may have closed her door. But I had built something stronger. Dignity, love, and a life no one could take from me again. If you believe that no storm, no betrayal, can keep a strong woman down, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more true stories of survival and second chances.